Hello and welcome to HT Auto. Today we have a very special guest with us here today. We have Mr. Shashank Srivastava. He's Executive Director at Maruti Suzuki. We have him here to give us an insight about what's happening at Maruti Suzuki and his views on the automobile industry currently. Welcome, Mr. Srivastava.
Thank you.
First question related to Maruti Suzuki. It's been tough for not just your company but for the auto industry this year. But October for Maruti was very heartening. The figures looked up once again. How has it been there?
Yeah, so October was as you said, a real good month for us. So not just wholesale, which is actually what makes the headlines, but the retail, which was one of the best ever. So in that sense, it was quite a relief because after this was maybe the first instance since the last 9 months that we had a positive growth in retail, and only the second instance since we had a positive retail growth since last August,
Right.
which was like about 15 months back. So in that sense, it was relief, and obviously the sentiments of the festivities did help in that regard.
Right. Would you say that the market sentiment now is looking up, moving forward? Do you think things are shaping up nicely going forward?
Listen, I think, and I have mentioned this before, that we remain optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. And the reason is that we still have to wait and see at least the performance in the next couple of months, whether this is actually a change of direction as far as the industry is concerned, or it was just a one-off because of the festival and the pending demand and the pent-up demand. So we have to wait and see before we conclude what is the direction the auto industry has taken.
Right. So you're speaking also about the auto industry, but specific to Maruti Suzuki, what lies ahead for the company? We're entering into the new year. What are the plans?
Yeah, so this question is always asked, what has happened to the industry? It was growing so well last 5-6 years, and last 15 months it has actually been sort of not doing well, as you know very well. So we did analyze and we said, yes, one of the prime reasons is the cost of vehicles have gone up. The cost of acquisition has gone up. Financing is an issue because banks have tightened their norms of lending to both the dealers for the inventory and also to consumers for retail. Those factors, there has been a lot of confusion also in the market, like the transition from BS4 to BS6 norms. Those factors still remain.
Right.
So the factors going forward, whether it's November, December, coming up till March at least, we have those factors still remaining. So this gives us this is what brings caution into the whole optimism, and I think the transition from BS4 to BS6 will become extremely critical, especially when you look at diesel vehicles, where many of the manufacturers have said that they won't be actually transiting to BS6 diesel at all.
Right. Interesting. You mentioned BS6 because I was just coming to that.
Yeah.
How is Maruti looking at the BS6 transition? It's supposed to happen. It's scheduled to happen in April of 2020. What are your strategies moving forward, keeping that particular factor in mind?
Yeah, so two things which is very clear. One, we have moved out of diesel. We will be moving out of diesel because the cost of conversion from BS4 to BS6 in diesel is extremely high. Yeah. And I think for most vehicles, especially the smaller cars, there is the consumers will who are very sensitive to price will probably not prefer diesel at all. However, one of the big things about our strategy of this transition to BS6 has been that we have brought in BS6 vehicles much ahead of the schedule mandated by the government. So what was mandated by the government was that from 1st April 2020, all vehicles which will be sold will necessarily have to be BS6. But we have already introduced 8 of our models which are BS6. We in fact introduced the Alto and the Baleno almost a year in advance. So we introduced in April 2019, subsequently Wagon-R, then we had the Desire, the Swift, the Tiga, the XL6, the Espresso, and so on and so forth. Now these models are not small selling models. They cover a huge amount of our sales. In fact, more than 70% of the sales in petrol. So our strategy has been to introduce it earlier and keep pushing and monitoring the stock of BS4 vehicles, and so that when the transition stage does come, we don't have to necessarily go in for a fire sale, which we saw when there was this transition in two-wheelers and trucks.
Right. So, do you see a sense of first mover advantage that Maruti has enjoyed? All other things withstanding, specifically in terms of BS6, do you see Maruti Suzuki having made the most of the transition that it's?
Yeah, so in that sense, let me tell you that BS6 has been very well received. So one of the things which some of the analysts have been saying is that this entails necessarily an increase in prices, which we have increased. For petrol also, the price increases have been there because of the transition to BS6. So there was always this risk of consumers rejecting it because a cheaper BS4 is available. But what we have found is that consumers have actually liked this BS6 and they have absorbed this concept, and also in fact are preferring BS6 vehicles. And the reason for that is that consumers believe, and it's actually true, that the exhaust system, the engine system of BS6 vehicles is obviously better. It's technologically more advanced, and therefore it is meant for the next level of thing. So we are very clear that consumers now want BS6 and they prefer BS6 wherever, and that's the reason why we have sold almost 300,000 BS6 vehicles already, which is a lot. The other thing which is in our strategy, which I just mentioned, while we move away from diesel, probably for gasoline vehicles, it's only possible to introduce BS6 earlier only in gasoline.
Right.
It's not possible in diesel, because if you have a BS6 diesel and you have only BS4 fuel available, it doesn't work. Right. However, in gasoline, it is fuel agnostic, which means that a BS4 gasoline can work on BS6 fuel, a BS6 gasoline vehicle can work on BS4. Right. So that has been our basic thrust as far as this area is concerned.
One very interesting thing that you said about consumers, and consumers are at the core of all of what we're talking about. Indian market, Indian car buying market, the buyers, we've always known us to be very price sensitive, very price conscious. Do you see that that's been changing now? People are ready to pay a little extra because they are more aware of more technologies that have come in, so they don't really mind a little bit extra in terms of how much they're shelling out for a car, as long as they're getting, say, more convenience, more comfort, more safety as well. And since we were on the BS6, cleaner technology.
Yes. You are very right. First of all, it applies to all categories of cars. However, it applies differently to different categories. So entry-level segment is still more price sensitive than a mid-level segment, than a high-end segment. But if you talk in general terms, then yes, people are accepting the fact that if you have a cleaner technology, you'll have to pay a little more for it. People are preferring the function, the features, even if they have to pay a little extra. So yes, as a general concept, you are very right. But as I said, for the entry-level segment, it's a little different, in the sense that while people are paying more, they are much more sensitive to in large increases in prices.
So what you're saying is, even within a segment there has been a slight change, of course. So within each segments there have been slight changes.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. We've spoken about the consumers. We'll come back again to the consumers, but coming back to Maruti Suzuki, what is the company's expectations from the government moving forward? Again, since we are, whether it's in terms of how the industry as a whole has been performing or BS6 transition, what are your expectations from the government moving forward?
Yeah, so I think this question was raised many times when this GST discussion was happening. And the thrust of the argument of most manufacturers was that the drop in sales in the industry has been because the cost of acquisition has gone up, the finance norms have got tightened, and of course this confusion of BS4, BS6 and other confusions, including how the monsoon would be, whether going back actually the elections, whether you will have a stable government and so on and so forth. I think going forward, each of these questions has been addressed, in the sense we now have a stable government with a good majority. The monsoon has been good, so sentimentally rural areas are much better. Then government has clarified a lot of things about BS4, BS6, that yes, BS4 vehicles can be registered till first, and that they can be used later as well, even though the new cars have to be registered with BS6, and so on and so forth. The question of road taxes increased by the state has also been to some extent been in the highlight. So our as far as Maruti Suzuki is concerned, we have a very clear thought about this government intervention, which is the government knows much more about the economy. We know only about our sector. Government has to take care of a lot of other issues than just one sector. So I think they know best what was to be done. The government obviously looks at the entire industry, the entire economy, takes thing, and we are confident that they will take steps which benefit the industry and the economy as a whole. Our focus is to not speculate what the government will do, whether will be a GST cut, whether there will be a tax benefit, whether there will be when it will be, which category of cars, and so on and so forth. We are not getting into that debate at all, or speculation at all. We are focused on what we can do. And that is the reason why we have introduced, for example, new models despite what is going when the industry was in down. We introduced XL6, we introduced the Espresso. We transited to BS6 in 8 models, as we just discussed, because we thought that's the way the government wanted industry to go. Recently, government did give a corporate tax break. A reduction in the effective rate, and we have reduced prices also to that effect. So we are trying to tackle each of these issues which are affecting whatever is under our control, and we don't necessarily speculate on what the government will do.
So we've spoken about the company, what's been happening now, what's in the immediate future in terms of BS6. We've spoken also about the government and how it has to take care of not just the auto sector, but a whole lot. We're going to get to the most popular question of what do we expect at the Auto Expo, because Maruti Suzuki is a very, very big player otherwise and specifically at the Auto Expo. So a lot of people want to know what to expect. There have been quite a number of launches in 2019, but Auto Expo is a big, fantastic playing ground for all companies, and also
yes, absolutely. I think well said, and I think Auto Expo has a real significance for the industry. It happens every 2 years, as you know, in February, first week, second week, and that's a place where you can showcase many of the technologies which will come in due course of time. It also gives an opportunities for the companies to launch new products, for example, to show technologies and launch new products. So I think this Auto Expo would be no different. So I suppose for Maruti Suzuki it would also be similar.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Srivastava, for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So there you had it, Mr. Srivastava. He was speaking about Maruti Suzuki, of the government plans, what it needs to be done, and generally the essence of what he also said was cautious optimism. Thank you so much for staying with us, and stay tuned.